is Taiwan's COVID strategy changing? The government announces an overhaul on how it counts cases. Like a scene from a horror movie, Ukraine accuses Russia of war crimes in the town of Bucha. Happy Children's Day, but should we be worried about our shrinking population? Plus,
I'm James Chater on Xiaoliuqiu, and I'll be finding out whether new restrictions on tourists will be enough to save disappearing coral here.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. Taiwan reported 275 new COVID-19 cases on Monday, including 133 local ones. The number of domestic cases has exceeded 100 for the past 4 days. Despite cases climbing, there are increasing calls for Taiwan to reopen its borders. Louise Watt reports.
More than 300 local cases were reported over the weekend, a seeming setback for Taiwan's efforts to control COVID-19. Taiwan has dealt with the pandemic much better than most other countries through strict border controls and quarantines. But recent weeks have seen new outbreaks linked to the Omicron variant. In an unusual move, health authorities have started separating the count for serious and mild cases. And they revealed that of the more than 1,700 domestic cases so far this year, all but 4 were mild or asymptomatic. This new way of reporting case numbers could be a sign that Taiwan is preparing the public for living with COVID, and maybe even a reopening of its borders. Many Taiwanese appear ready for a shift in strategy.
Taiwan's
health minister said the goal is for people to go about their daily lives as much as possible.
是要在趋近正常生活，完全要对正常生活不至于限制、妨害过大，在过正常生活下的积极抗疫。
Chen said that separating out patients with mild and severe symptoms will lower the burden on hospitals, where all patients usually have to go. Vaccination rates are also higher than they used to be, fueling calls for fewer restrictions. But Taiwan is for now erring on the side of caution. On Sunday, a 3-day music festival in the southern county of Pingdong was abruptly cancelled after one attendee tested positive. Local authorities made that call, but the Central Epidemic Command Center says that in future, large-scale events won't be shut down unless there is a cluster infection among staff. It's another sign of how Taiwan's government is trying to balance preventing the virus and living with it. Esnaya Zhou and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Ukraine is accusing Russia of committing war crimes in Bucha, northwest of the capital Kiev. An advisor to Ukraine's president says the town is like a scene from a horror movie with bodies strewn through the streets. Moscow is denying it has hurt civilians, calling the accusations provocation. Reinhold Kilpatrick reports.
Corpses litter the streets and fill what Ukrainian authorities claim are mass graves. All evidence, they say, of Russian war crimes in the town of Bucha, on the outskirts of Kiev. As Russian forces retreat from the capital region, they leave behind what Ukraine's president termed concentrated evil.
Президенти зазвичай не записують таких звернень, як це. Але сьогодні я повинен сказати саме так. Сказати після того, що відкрилося в Бучі та інших наших містах, звідки вигнали окупантів. Сотні вбитих людей. Закатованих, розстріляних, мирних людей. Тіла на вулицях, замінована територія, заміновані навіть тіла вбитих. Повсюди наслідки мародерства. На нашій землі побувало концентроване зло, вбивці, кати, гвалтівники, мародери, які називають себе армією і які заслуговують тільки на смерть після того, що вони зробили.
Ukrainian authorities say bodies are piled hundreds deep, with bound hands that bear the scars of close-range gunshots, signs of torture and systematic execution. Moscow maintains that these images are fake. but they have sent shockwaves throughout not only Ukraine, but all of Europe.
In diesen Stunden erreichen uns furchtbare und grauenerregende Aufnahmen aus der Ukraine. Wir sehen Dutzende erschossene Zivilisten in Bucha, ein Gebiet nördlich von Kiew, das bis vor wenigen Tagen vom russischen Militär kontrolliert worden ist. Straßen übersät mit Leichen, notdürftig verscharrte Körper. Es ist von Frauen, Kindern und Alten die Rede, die unter den Opfern sind. Die Ermordung von Zivilisten ist ein Kriegsverbrechen.
Russian tanks and armored personnel carriers rolled onto these streets in the first days of the invasion, barreling toward the capital before Ukrainian ambushes stopped them in their tracks. Today, these streets are carpeted with their burnt-out hulks. Bucha has become a graveyard for an as-yet untold number of Ukrainian civilians, but also for Russia's ambitions of quickly seizing Kiev and deposing President Zelensky. Ryan Hill-Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
To learn more about what's behind Russia's latest movements in Ukraine, TaiwanPlus reporter Rick Glauert spoke to Michael Clark, a defense analyst from the University of Exeter in the UK. He began by asking him what reinforcement in southeast Ukraine mean for Russia's campaign.
They're focusing on the southeast, refocusing on the southeast, because they failed in all of their other objectives. Remember, this war began as a war to remove the Ukrainian government and eliminate Ukraine as an independent state from the map of Europe. That was clearly Putin's intention. He more or less said that. It's what he wrote in his famous article of a year ago. That failed miserably. And so the Russians are now back to a very small part of their original requirement, which is to deepen their existing presence in the Donbass.
And we've seen messages from the Russian military that they would be withdrawing from some of the fronts, for example, around Kiev, and then reports on the ground seem to contradict this. What do you think this means for Russia's tactics?
The fact that what the Russians say and what they've done are two different things is not particularly surprising. The military is not very fast-footed. It's not particularly agile. And the fact that they're still bombarding cities like Chernihiv, and that there have been other explosions around Kiev and in certainly Kharkiv, also indicates that although they are locating the main thrust of their forces, it seems, to the southeast, they will nevertheless continue to surround the major cities that run along the Ukrainian-Russian border. But I think there's a political dimension here where the Russians will show that they want to leave Kiev alone, because instead now of trying to eliminate the Ukrainian government, they now know that at some point they will have to negotiate with it. So it makes sense to lessen their pressure on Kiev, even if they maintain their pressure on the other cities that they presently surround.
What do you think Russia might be trying to achieve in talks with Ukraine?
It's very hard to work out what the Russians really can achieve by negotiation, because they're not in a very strong position at the moment to negotiate. The Ukrainians are in a much better position to negotiate, and the Ukrainians have most of the rest of the world behind them, at least politically. But I think the Russians may come down to a more limited war aim, and will try to negotiate the acceptance of their presence in most or all of the Donbass region, the legitimacy of the Crimea as a part of Russia, which has been seized since 2014 and has been annexed completely illegally. So they might look for the legality of that. They might look for international acceptance of that. And they might try to negotiate to hold on to the land bridge between Donbass and Crimea that they've more or less got. I mean, if Mariupol falls, which is the only city holding up that land bridge, then they would have a stretch of territory between the Donbass and Crimea. They might try to hold on to that too, legally. However, there are about 2 million people in that area, 2 million Ukrainians, who certainly don't want to live under Russian control.
What signs do we have that Putin is at odds with his military leaders? And what do you think this means for Russia and this war?
I mean, Putin gave them an impossible task, which was to seize Ukraine within 72 hours on the completely mistaken assumption that the Ukrainians would not fight back, that the Ukrainians would at least be passive, if not indeed enthusiastic about it. That was totally and utterly wrong. And so Putin's design for this war, and Gerasimov, the chief of the general staff, is the man responsible for that design. Ultimately, it's his responsibility, even if it isn't his fault. But Putin embarked on a completely impossible military strategy, and now he is blaming the military and the security services for not carrying it out or not being successful. So there seems to be a great deal of tension at the top, and I think that's inevitable in this sort of situation.
India is the only major country close to the United States that has not condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. On a trip to New Delhi last week, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov praised India for maintaining a neutral stance. He also met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who called for an end to the violence in Ukraine. India was Moscow's ally during the Cold War, but has since sought to maintain good relations with both Russia and the West.
Friendship is the
TaiwanPlus reporter Louise Watt spoke to Nirupama Subramanian, a Delhi-based journalist with the Indian Express. She started by asking her why India is refusing to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
It has a legacy relationship with Russia. It's a very long-standing relationship going back to the time of the Cold War. It has a strong defense partnership. We import 60% of our defense requirements from Russia. So these are the things that have gone into the consideration of the line that India has taken. It is a balancing act, no doubt. But I think it is also something that in international relations is called exercising your strategic autonomy. And all countries do that. All countries act in their best interests on any global issue.
And why do you think ordinary Indians have been supportive of this? Is it because they think Russia is very important to India, or are there any other reasons?
I think many Indians are worried about their about the defense of the country, and they're very aware that we do not have friendly neighbors. We have on the west, we have Pakistan, and the north, we have China, and we have problematic relations with both these countries.
Is there any discussion going on in India these days about any concerns that India is dependent on this nation that seems to be increasingly aligning itself with China?
There is a bit of concern about that, about what the Russia-China relationship means for India, because India, as I said, has a problematic relationship with China. But it is friends with Russia. India does have concerns about the supply of defense hardware from Russia and how the sanctions might hit it. India and Russia are in conversation about this. India has also, in the last few years, diversified its defense. India bought oil recently from Russia, and there was an understanding that they can buy this oil. And India is also questioning at this moment that why is Europe allowed to import its energy requirements from Russia? Why is Europe being given that exception? And why should it not be available to India? Why is the world coming after India to raise questions about that? Or its defense relationship with Russia, when Europe, which is dependent on Russia for its energy needs, can go ahead and do business with Russia until it finds some way of substituting it. And apparently there is no way of substituting what Europe imports from Russia, at least in the near and the midterm, in fact. So these are questions that are being raised about the hypocrisy of the West in asking questions of India when they do the same with Russia.
Taiwan is marking Children's Day, a day that puts the focus on the importance of future generations. The annual celebration comes as the country's birth rate continues to decline. Eric Gao reports.
A shrinking population. Taiwan's birth rate is now officially the lowest in the world, standing at 1.07 births per woman in 2021. That is significantly lower than the United States, China, and even Japan, which are all known for low birth rates. Surveys show that many young Taiwanese do not consider marriage important, But there is also a more practical reason behind many people's decision not to have children.
台湾低薪跟高房价的环境，让想筹组小家庭的人，他面临的困难其实是增加的。
In 2019, the birth rate in Taiwan was surpassed by deaths for the first time, and it's only worsened since then. The Ministry of the Interior says the country's population shrank 0.84% year on year in January of 2022. To encourage couples to have more children, the government offers subsidies and financial assistance, including an expanded rental subsidy program announced in March. But spending may have to increase greatly to have the desired effect.
像台湾一年大概政府花在这边的预算大概在100亿的上下。那如果我们看看欧洲像法国跟德国，大概都将投入将近1年4000亿。我们邻近的日本也1年投入到5000亿。那他们的很快的就反映在他们的生产的这个个案数上面。
Aside from financial assistance, Huang feels more needs to be done within society to make having children less of a burden.
所以我们如何要给这个孕妇能够有尊荣感，在职场能够有遇到一些比较友善的对待，这些大概都是相当的重要。
If Taiwan can't turn the low birth rate around, government figures project a massive loss of population in the coming decades. Klein Wong and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese designers Li Zhenghan and Yu Wei took home a Grammy for Best Recording Package at the awards in Las Vegas on Sunday. Their work on the packaging for the physical release of Bagalang by second-generation Falangao singing group and a chairman crossover big band beat out 4 other contenders, including fellow Taiwanese designer Xiaoliuqiu. The album design was inspired by an indigenous village located by the sea in eastern Taiwan. Li and Yu took the opportunity to invite everyone to visit Taiwan during their acceptance speech.
Hello, everyone. We're so glad to participate in Grammy Award through the album of Bagalang, making more people know about Taiwan. We're from Taiwan. Thank you. Taiwan is a beautiful and peace-loving country. Thanks to our friends and the crew who helped us all the way. So thank you so much. And I hope someday if you can go visit Taiwan. Super welcome. Thank you.
The weekend saw a commemorative event of the 1-year anniversary of a deadly train accident on Taiwan's east coast that killed 49 people and injured over 200. The accident was the worst on the country's railways in more than 70 years. It was caused by a crane truck that rolled down from a nearby worksite and settled on the track moments before the arrival of an oncoming Taroko Express service. Since then, contractors and safety experts have blamed the state-run Taiwan Railways Administration and accused the company of mismanagement. Taiwan's transport minister has called for reforms of the administration to prevent such accidents from happening again.
1年来，我们在安全改革也花很多力气。虽然在这1年来没有重大的事故，但是小的事故或是惊险的事故还是不断哈。那这部分我们必须再持续加强。
4 men have been released on bail after being questioned over their involvement in a demolition gone awry that caused chaos on Taiwan's rail network Friday. The 4 could face charges of endangering public safety. John Van Trieste has more.
Free to go. For now. After overnight questioning, police released 4 men allegedly involved in a mishap that paralyzed rail travel and might have taken lives.
我们静候司法调查，好不好？我们全力配合。好，先这样，谢谢。
On Friday, just meters from train tracks, the suspect's construction company demolished a storage silo at a cement plant in the southern city of Kaohsiung, taking an unapproved shortcut in the process.
施工计划书是由上而下。 就分段是一层一层慢慢的去用大钢牙去慢慢的把它拆卸下来。
Instead, the company knocked the 52-meter-high silo down in one go with a crane and wrecking ball. The silo toppled in the wrong direction, hitting a power transmission tower on the way down. The loss of the tower knocked out power to both high-speed and regular trains in the area. over 120,000 travelers were affected by the ensuing disruptions to service, which went on for up to 7 hours. The construction firm faces fines and demands for compensation, but that could be just the beginning of the legal troubles the 4 suspects on bail could face. Prosecutors say they may have violated construction rules laid out in the criminal code, and they say they're working to charge the 4 with endangering public safety. Damon Lin and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has announced she will not be seeking a second term in office. The surprise announcement comes as Lam faces scrutiny from both the public and Beijing for her handling of Hong Kong's disastrous 5th wave outbreak of COVID-19, which saw the city's death rate rise to the highest in the world. Lam's decision opens the way for the city's number 2 official, Chief Secretary John Lee, to fill her position. Lee was a key proponent of Lam's 2019 extradition bill that plunged the city into over a year of unrest. Sri Lanka's entire cabinet, aside from the president and his brother, the prime minister, have stepped down amid a worsening economic crisis. The resignation of 26 ministers came after thousands of protesters defied a 36-hour nationwide curfew on Sunday. Although the move isn't likely to affect the government's survival, it may prevent it from lawfully extending the country's state of emergency order. Sri Lanka is in the midst of an economic crisis triggered by a severe shortage of foreign exchange that's stopping the government from purchasing adequate supplies of food, fuel, and medicines. The coral on Xiaoliuqiu used to be among the richest in Taiwan, but now, because of human and natural factors, it's at risk of being irreversibly damaged. Our reporter James Chater visited the island to find out what new rules are coming into force to protect it.
From the pristine beaches of Xiaoliuqiu, Taiwan's mainland looks serene in the mist. But beneath these clear waters, a looming ecological disaster.
大家都知道小琉球，它是一个大家号称的珊瑚礁岛屿，所以它的珊瑚礁状况应该要非常好的。那只是现在它已经在一个很不好的状态了。
Some 12,000 people live in Xiaoliuqiu, a small island 15 kilometers off Taiwan's southern coast, and most of the island's residents work in tourism.
Tens of thousands of tourists come to Xiaoliuqiu every month, and the once flourishing coral here used to be a big part of the island's appeal. But now, some are concerned that a combination of human and natural factors are causing irreversible damage to the reefs.
Xiaoliuqiu's coral is in crisis. Parts of it have been left barren by high sea temperatures, poor wastewater management, and a surge in tourism. Of Xiaoliuqiu's 7 coral zones, 3 are now classified as disabled, meaning they have coral coverage of less than 10%. Adju was born and raised in Xiaoliuqiu and now takes classes on coral conservation.
我们以前的小琉球，你可以在港边，你就可以抓很多的鱼。我们小时候把它抓起来，然后去炸，好几百斤那一种。然后可以在潮间带挖很多的那种贝类，我们这边都叫头柜。半小时也可以挖一大袋，现在是挖不到。
To give the beleaguered corals some breathing room, 70% of visitors to the intertidal zone will now have to book online, and the government is restricting the numbers to 300 at any one time. The intertidal zone is the area of shoreline above water at low tide and below water at high tide. But some coral conservationists are concerned that the new rules aren't wide enough.
它的确在管理就是潮间带管理上有加强，因为过去它可能为了让游客更方便，有比较宽松一点。那现在稍微有强制约束一点那这部分我觉得一定会有帮助但是在水下的部分，我只是觉得目前就以水下的部分，它没有提出比较明显的管理措施。
A January report by Taiwan's Ocean Conservation Administration found that coral coverage in Xiaoliuqiu's non-diving zones ranged from 6.5% to 31.8%, whereas in diving zones it was only 0.3 to 5.5%. As well as diving, severe bleaching since 2020 has contributed to the coral's dire situation. Bleaching occurs when ocean waters become too warm. As a result, coral expels the algae it needs to survive.
2020那时候就是没有什么台风，没有什么降雨， 导致水温一直降不下来，那就造成，所以水温一直维持在很高的 level， 很高的那个水准，所以导致珊瑚大白化。
Since then, Xiaoliuqiu's coral hasn't been able to fully recover. But despite the significant challenge, Adji believes a mindset adjustment could make all the difference.
珊瑚是一个很古老的生物，它比恐龙还久，所以我不想要用我们人类的观点去看待这个，而是我觉得我们可以把我们会影响到它的行为，把它自己管理好，或许它本来就有能力自己恢复。
Conservationists like Adji are determined to do all they can to protect Xiaoliuqiu's coral, and the marine life that call it home are counting on it. Asnaya Zhou and James Chaser for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. Finally today, we'll leave you with footage of red pandas and snow leopards at Dublin Zoo in Ireland. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.